All right, let's get right into this. What we have here is a classified postmortem, a deep dive into something called Project Genesis. And you can tell just from the title, this is not a success story. No, this is all about a catastrophic failure. It's an investigation into how a super ambitious project didn't just fail, it created a predictable disaster, one that was really rooted in pure arrogance. And the final verdict? Well, it's laid out right here. No sugarcoating it. Project Genesis was a complete and total operational failure. Worse than that, it actually resulted in an uncontrollable and, frankly, significant liability. The end product was an individual who was mentally unstable, physically misshapen, and completely, utterly useless for what they intended. And this just says it all, doesn't it? When they ran the numbers, when they assessed him for actual use, the asset's operational viability was rated at exactly 0%, a total waste. They didn't just fail to create an asset, they actually created a brand new active problem. So the question is, how on earth did this happen? How do you pour all that time and money into something and end up with this? Well, to understand the failure, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the project's original mandate. See, this was never about inventing something new. It was about trying to repeat history. And you've got to understand the context here, because it's everything. Project Genesis was designed as a direct sequel to another wildly successful initiative called Project Zarathustra. So the goal wasn't innovation, it was replication. They thought they had this winning formula, and the plan was just to hit copy and paste to get another superhuman asset. The stakes, as you can imagine, were incredibly high. The mission was spelled out, crystal clear, right in the project's charter. Their goal was to engineer a uniquely British superhero. The main objectives were pretty straightforward. Give him exceptional powers, ensure he has unwavering loyalty to Britain, and make him a classic heroic archetype, a symbol for the nation. I mean, this was basically nation building through a test tube. But the gap between what they wanted and what they got, wow. It wasn't just a miss, it was a total inversion. I mean, a complete 180. Instead of a powerful superhuman, they got someone physically misshapen. Instead of fierce loyalty, they got profound mental instability. And instead of a classic hero, they created a person trapped inside a massive delusion. Every single objective was flipped on its head. So, the big question is, where did it all go so wrong? The investigation makes it really clear that this wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. No, this failure was baked into the project's DNA from the very first day. And here it is. This is the smoking gun. The report says the architects acted as mere plagiarists. They took a massive shortcut. Instead of understanding the original science, they decided to build their entire project exclusively on incomplete notes from Project Zarathustra. They were literally trying to build a castle on a foundation of dust. And this is the part that you really have to let sink in. The mental and physical instability of the guy they created, that wasn't some unforeseen side effect. The report calls it the predictable, scientifically certain outcome of their method. The instability wasn't a bug in the system, it was a core feature of their broken process. Failure was, for all intents and purposes, guaranteed from the start. And this guaranteed failure, well, it has a name, Asset Big Ben. And his entire psychology, everything he is a direct result of that fundamentally broken creation process. So let's break this down. The asset, Big Ben, he developed what this report calls a deeply entrenched, non-negotiable delusional framework. Now, why would that happen? Well, it's because, as the analysis puts it, the organism could not bear the truth of its own deformity. It's like his mind had to invent an entire substitute reality just to survive. So in his own head, he's this handsome hero on a secret mission fighting communists. It's a complete fiction that lets him function, but it also makes him totally, dangerously uncontrollable. And because he's only playing by the rules inside his own head, you can't direct him, you can't control him. This led to his final classification. He wasn't just a failed asset. He had to be reclassified as a significant liability. He's not just a zero on the board. His very existence is an active threat to national security. But the story doesn't stop there. In a really terrifying twist, the same foundational flaw that created his delusion also planted the seeds for something far more transformative and way more dangerous. The initial failure, believe it or not, actually created the perfect conditions for something much, much worse. And that brings us right to the heart of this whole mystery. What exactly was Project Zarathustra? What was the critical piece of information that was missing from those notes? What was the secret ingredient that made the difference between a stunning success and this absolute catastrophe? And here's the jaw-dropping reveal. The name Zarathustra, that was no coincidence. It was a direct reference to the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. The original project's goal was never to create a simple superhero. The real intent was to engineer an Übermensch, an overman, a god. They weren't just copying a hero. They were trying to plagiarize a blueprint for divinity itself. So how does a broken man become something more? Well, because Big Ben was so fundamentally flawed, his entire mental world was incredibly fragile. The report points to a single trigger, a completely unexpected moment of compassion that caused his entire made-up reality to just collapse. The lie shattered, and in that moment he was able to pierce the veil of Maya, which is a fancy way of saying he saw the true nature of reality, beyond all illusion. With his delusion gone, his consciousness was just raw, exposed directly to the source code of existence. He went through this devastating transformation and became something new, the will made flesh. The initial failure became the engine for a completely uncontrolled apotheosis. So what do you even take away from a monumental disaster like this? Well, the final section of the postmortem really boils it down to the hard-learned lessons. The summary of failures is just damning. First, a shocking failure of due diligence. They just went ahead with incomplete notes. That led directly to a failure of risk assessment because they had no idea what they were truly risking. And the result? A total and complete failure to achieve any of their objectives, creating a massive liability instead of an asset. So, the primary recommendation is a new, hard and fast rule for all special projects going forward. From now on, moving ahead with incomplete intelligence is no longer a calculated risk. It's now officially reclassified as a procedural violation, period. A hard line in the sand, meant to prevent this exact kind of scientific and nationalistic arrogance from ever happening again. And this leaves us with the final, really haunting question that sits at the very heart of this entire catastrophe. When you try to copy a god's power, but you don't understand the philosophy, the struggle, the purpose behind it, what is it that you actually end up creating? Well, Project Genesis gives us a pretty terrifying answer. End of briefing. A very stark conclusion to a story about ambition, failure, and the catastrophic consequences of taking shortcuts when you're trying to play God.